Okay, it is exactly 8:30. It is Wednesday, September the 16th, 2020, and this is it. This is week 6 of B234, also known as business law, and I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I've been with you for the last 6 weeks, and so I'm here for the very last class, and I will spend time sharing information with you about this week's assignment. So let's get right into it. Sharing my screen. Okay. So as you can see, going down the rubrics, there is no week. Well, there's a week 6 time of reflection. So you're going to do this, and this is actually not a paper. This is a brochure, and you're going to uh, take care of each of these issues. Okay. And if you notice, there is no APA requirement here. And then that's it. That's the assignment. There is no, the last project was due last week. Many of you, I hope have turned them in. If you have not turned them in, you can still turn them in now. They'll be late, but be aware that Friday is it. Course ends. And then here are our recordings. Pretty quick. 5.5 weeks. To some people consider it 6 weeks, but it's 5.5 because we started in the middle of the week. All right, and let's look at the course calendar, and you'll see that the time is running out in a couple of days. How about if I take out the 115? It keeps jumping in there. Okay. What else is in there? 150. Okay. So anyway, you can see this is where we are, the 16th. Your reading assignment, which involves chapters 9 to 12, and then dealing with ethics and the law, technology strategy, and management on the Toyota, and then flashcards located at the end. You'll notice one thing about this course, that your reply post is due Friday, 2 days from now. Your written assignment is due 2 days from now. Your key phrase is due 2 days from now. Nothing will help you after the 18th. If you submit it after 11:59 on the 18th, which will be the 19th, it's not going to be graded. And that's it. Okay. So let's close this down. I try to make sure that every student understands the fact that this class actually ends on the 18th every week. If you go back and look at any of the lectures, you will see I went over the calendar and reminded each and every student. So here we go with our final week announcement, ethics and business law. I remember I taught ethics and business uh, before, we'll talk about that a little bit. Chapters 9 and 12 of the text, as I said, and then technology strategies and management reflection on the Toyota debacle, and um, complete the activities, ethics, and the law, and your flashcards for study and practice. Then the discussion assignment, from unethical to illegal. As I said, the initial post was due yesterday, and then your reply post is due Friday. Time for reflection. Pay close attention to the rubrics, as I always have said throughout the whole course. Reminding you again that Friday the 18th is it. And that, again, remind you again. So you have no, as a matter of fact, I don't know how anybody could miss the fact that the course ends on the 18th. And then, my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. I shared that with you earlier in the course. And right now, many of you don't know this, but I'm dealing with some very serious adversity right now as I speak to you. And it's going to be okay, but it's still a challenge. And it's a health issue, and it's not COVID. So, but I'm going to be okay. I'm going to keep on pressing through it. I'm going to keep on teaching and reaching students and helping. It may slow me down, but it will not stop me. And that's the way I encourage each of my students to operate. Module 6, again, repeating the assignments. So with the time for reflection, basically what you're doing is you're going back over some of the things that we've talked about for the last 5.5 weeks. And so you're going to create a brochure, and there is a way you can do the brochure. It's a trifold design. It's this double-sided. Draw attention to your brochure by using artwork. Don't just give me words. You know what a brochure looks like. You've seen them many times, and you're going to cover these issues. Each of these 5 issues: a definition of business law and why one should study it. We started talking about that. The difference between the law and the ethics. A list of topics covered with a brief description for each one. Remember, this is a brochure, so it don't have to be a whole lot of information on each topic. So you want to hit the highlight from each week that we've had in this course. And a section on emerging trends related to business law. Then takeaways, and then how we use the information from this class. I certainly know that many of you should never forget contracts that should be in writing and why it should be in writing. I gave you a mnemonic that I don't have to say, but it is a part of your body, and your toes are attached to it, your feet are attached to it, okay? And it's attached to you. Most people are given 2. Sometimes people end up with 1, but you know what I mean. And so I'm not going to elaborate on that. So make sure you follow what the rubric says and get that in. And then remember, it's a Word document, okay? It must be a Word document. Then your discussion post. And we're going to deal with unethical acts. And then finally, your live lecture response. And those are the assignments. Any questions about this time for reflection assignment? Any questions or concerns? Type them in the chat box. I'll see it. Okay. All right. So that's one of the good things about coming to the live lecture. I can ask that question and you can answer it contemporaneously. Uh, and in this instance, it's very good to have been at the last lecture because the class ends in a couple of days. So, all right. So let's get into the topic for the final session. Let's talk about ethics and the law. So you're going to read these items, chapters 9 and 12 of your textbook, which you have, and this article, Tech Strategy and Management Reflections on the Toyota Debacle. And then we're going to talk about ethics and the law, pretty much this course lecture. And then we're going to go over the activities, flashcards. So there's been a number of things that have happened where there's been some ethical issues. And the ethical issues generally are things that may be illegal, but may not, but will be something that is generally not good for the public or for the persons who work there, employees. And so there have been laws that have been passed, such as OSHA, the Occupational Safe and Health Act. There's the Federal Trade Commission, also known as the FTC, to be a watchdog over consumer affairs, to make sure that individuals are not um, ripped off, to make sure that things are they try to keep it even keel. And so the question is, when does it reach the stage where it is ethical but not quite legal? And if you read that article that I told you, you'll have a good idea. Let me share something with you. I remember when I taught ethics and business for Rasmussen, and we went over uh, things that ultimately became illegal, but they started out as unethical um, practices. One of the things that is unethical, we thought, but not illegal, was the representation of a product. Um, as you should be aware, that if, for example, you go to the store and you pick up, and one of the clearest examples is juice. My wife always remind her that you have to pay very careful to the label. And the label, if it's juice, it will say 100% juice. And guess what? It's going to have to be 100% juice. Now, not watered down to stretch it, because juice itself has water in it. It's made up of water. But so, for example, if you get grape juice from grapes, there's going to be liquid in the grapes, and it's going to turn into the juice. Now, if you drink that juice, it should be 100% grape juice. Should not have sugar added, high fructose, or any of these other things. Now, one of the ways that you can tell whether something is 100% juice or not is by the price. If you get 100% juice, you're going to spend more money for it, but it's going to be better for you. Um, and um, and so there are no additives to it. There's no so-called vitamins added in addition to the vitamins that are created by the juice itself. And you will generally see um, juice blend. And now, if you see a mixture of juices, like for example, I drink cranberry juice, and I have on occasion had cran apple. Same thing applies. It can be a combination of the two juices, but if it's a blend, it's going to possibly have other additives to it. And so one of the ethical issues that has derived over the years is the requirement. The USDA has U.S. Department of Agriculture has monitored labeling, and the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, dealing with um, products that are what they say they are, and you should get what you pay for. And so, as a result of that, there have been other instances where, for example, um, I'll use the study that we did in class that made me decide that I didn't want to go to Taco Bell. Now, Taco Bell, you should be aware of, was not caught, but had to make sure that uh, you're aware of the fact that so-called beef that you have in your taco is a mixture of beef and some kind of additives. We don't know exactly what those are, and that the percentage is usually pretty high. So it's not 100% beef that you're getting, and so you find yourself in a situation where you were eating, you thought you were eating beef, but it really was not beef. There have been some of the same issues that took place with McDonald's, though I represented through a law firm that I used to work for. Started out and worked my way up from a messenger to a lawyer that represented McDonald's, and there had been allegations that McDonald's was using horse meat. That was not true. That was absolutely not true. And so they were using beef, and but it's the way that they cooked it. They fixed it. Now, of the burgers, just for your information, which burger do you prefer of the big chains? What's your favorite burger of the chains? Some will say none, but if you were getting one, which one would you prefer? A quarter pounder McDonald's. Okay, they're good, but my favorite burger, to be honest with you, of the big chains, used to be Burger King, but then they changed their method. My favorite became Wendy's because um, of their burgers, and the meat reminding me more of what I would get at home if I was eating at home. So but I do like the same thing that you like as well, Kent. So it's not an issue with it. But you should be aware of the fact that people should uh, understand that the way that you fix something in a restaurant and serve it out can also affect some of the health issues, some of the oil and grease and things like that. So, so the point of matter is that I'm bringing to your attention is that there are debates about those kinds of things as well. There are also issues when we relate to ethical issues like the one that Taco Bell had. There are some issues that misrepresentations. For example, I think all of you should be or have heard of Enron. Have you ever heard of Enron? You need to look at that. Enron. And Enron was a huge, huge misrepresentation of the value of the stock of the company. And they worked together with their accountants. Their accountants were called Arthur Andersen. You've heard of Arthur Andersen accounting firm? Well, they worked together with them. And as a result of that, there were two people who ended up going to jail. One of them killed himself. His name was Ken Lay. He killed himself because he knew he was going to jail and he couldn't take it, so he committed suicide. The other person is a person that is kind of known in the area where I am. He's from Aurora, Illinois, which is where one of our Rasmussen campuses is located. And his brother is a well-known weatherman in Chicago on WGN TV. His name is Tom Skilling. He's Tom still on the air even now. We call him the professor. But his brother, Jeffrey Skilling, ended up serving, and I think he's out now, Jeff's out, a tremendous amount of time in jail for being involved with that. And what happened with Enron is that many individuals who invested in Enron, which was an energy company, um, lost their life savings, retirement funds. A lot of seniors were adversely affected. There were a lot of entertainers and professionals who were taken advantage of with those kinds of things as well. So you have those. Now, one of the most noted ones really was illegal, but it was a scheme. It was a Ponzi scheme. And have you heard of Bernard Madoff? Yes. He ended up serving big time in jail for a Ponzi scheme. And what a Ponzi scheme is something that appears to be something of substance, and people put their money up. And Mr. Madoff was given and trusted the money of those people, and same thing happened. And because there was not even any substance in it, it was like trying to sell somebody swampland to build a house on. Uh, excuse me. So as a result of that, he ended up in prison. They did a movie about him. I was listening to a stand-up comedian, Jay Leno, years ago. He made the statement. He said that Bernard Madoff would never have gotten his money because his name uh, said what he was really doing. He made off with the people's money, and it was kind of a joke, but it was sad because many people did end up losing those kind of things. And then there's the unethical practice that can also end up being illegal is insider trading. Do you know what insider trading is? Yes. So one of the people who was guilty about lying about insider trading and was a very well-known individual, had a name, a company with her own name on it, ended up serving a short period of time in jail. You know who that was? Mm-hmm. Good old Martha. Yeah, Martha Stewart. And so the thing is that you can't uh, be on the board or active in the board and know about something that's going on and have stock in it and dump your stock first um, before the public is aware. And that's what we call insider trading. And that's illegal because it hurts the economy and it damages people in terms of their investments. And so um, the government um, watches over that thing. There's an organization called the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. It's interesting if you look at my picture, when I graduated from law school, you will see a dean. He just passed recently. His name was Reuter. Dean Reuter became the secretary of the Securities and Exchange Commission under one of the presidents. I don't remember which one, but he tried to hire many of the Northwestern law students to go work with him as well. But they dealt with issues um, of that nature, and so there's been a lot of unethical issues, and uh, in the workplace when it comes to dealing with unethical considerations. Consider some of these, what we call sweatshops. That's what I call them. And this is where, for example, there are low wages paid. Um, the minimum wage is not followed, and that also minors are used to work. And also, one other thing that happened is that the products were not made in the United States and they were made in foreign countries. Um, One of our major shoe companies had been guilty of that. You know what company that is, right? Yep, yep. And I have a pair that was given to me as a gift directly from the person whose shoes they were. They weren't his personal shoes, but the Jordans. Michael and I, got to know each other, and I have right now a pair of his original Jordans, and they were red, black, and you know the ones I'm talking about. And so they're much different from what the Air Jordans look like today. And there were problems that Michael caught because of his shoes and other Nike products being manufactured in sweatshops. And so it wasn't illegal, but there were some ethical practices. The key thing for you to be aware of when it deals with ethics is that, and business, we try to recognize that people should uh, get what they pay for, the quality, and the individuals who are employees who work for these companies, manufacturers, or organizations like Nike should be paid commensurate with a fair buck. They should have benefits, and so they should be able to go to work, and um, you get proper equipment, proper training, and as a result, there are safer products. As you and I both know, one of the most recalled items in the world is a what? What's one of the most recalled items? Vehicles, exactly. Yeah. And so there is a organization that oversees that, but you should be aware of the fact that, I mean, inevitably, the Federal Trade Commission monitors that, but I get these notices that are emailed to me about vehicles, and I get things sent to me. Do you know when you register your vehicle that if something goes wrong with it, then the manufacturer should notify you. And one of the issues that has taken place that's of a dangerous nature involve Toyota. And when you read about that and study that, you might decide you don't ever want to buy a Toyota. I do know that um, I've watched the um, vehicles that I did not want, but I ended up with one anyway. Is for years and years and years, I never wanted a Ford. I always was a General Motors person. And I did pretty well with those cars. Then finally, I never had a Ford, but I have now a Lincoln, which is actually uh, the family of Ford. But it's pretty reliable. I know people who have foreign cars, like my wife has. She drives a Mercedes, and you know, she hasn't had a recall for the newer one that she has, but the older one she had, she used to get recalls all the time. Um, by the way, speaking of cars, Jaguar, do you know what American company and the parts were used to make put Jaguars together? Do you know? Nope. Take another guess. Another major one. Well, the answer is Ford. Nope, it's Ford. Ford. A friend of mine, excuse me, who went to high school with me and went to the military. And when he came out, he got a job the Ford plant in Chicago. And he was the one that hooked me up on that. He said, "Did you not know that your Jaguar, when we had one, he says that the parts for Ford were used interchangeably to put those together, but you paid more money for those Ford parts and the product because of the brand name Jaguar that was on the car and itself, but was really um, parts of it. And there was this old, the old joke. People used to have problems with Fords, and we had we take the letters and we say things like Ford found on FORD found on road dead, fix or repair daily. Have you ever heard any of those phrases? Yeah. And so people didn't want to get Fords, but Ford got it up, and started doing things better. Um, the Mercury is also part of the Lincoln, and that's all Ford. And so they've got better products. The key thing is that we have to be aware that one of the problems that happen is with cars, and why I mention cars as being one of the um, products that is subject to recall constantly, is because as soon as you get a car, like we bought a 2019 car, and we bought a 2019 last year, which was 2019. But they were already, and we bought it in November, or no, December. And so I bought it for my wife for Christmas. And uh, at the same time, they were releasing and getting ready to roll out the 20s. And no, she got it 2020. No, she got she got the 19. So it was still in 2019. So now uh, she took her car in because we have, we take it in and they maintain the vehicle and take care of it for us. We pay for that. And then they gave her a vehicle that was included in what I paid for her to keep and drive for a day. That was a 2020. But there was not much difference in that car except the price. But my point to you is that they are so quick to get these cars out, and that sometimes they don't tighten up everything because they have a deadline, and because of the way the assembly line is, and they're moving really fast. And you'll notice that what has happened is that the newer cars are the ones that have the recalls. The older cars, I mean, going back to when I was a kid, there was not as many recalls because they didn't have the pressures. But now, because of the marketing and everybody's working quickly to try to get their car out first, and they want to change some of the features and adding all kinds of things, and there are all kinds of problems that happen. And that same issue is going to occur as we change and move forward from gas to electric cars like Tesla and other cars that are so-called energy efficient cars, cars that use gas blends and things of that nature. Speaking of cars, when I was a kid growing up, you could get leaded or unleaded gasoline. But because gasoline adversely affected the air that we breathe, and they did away with it. It's illegal now to sell that because of the emission issues. And speaking of that, as you are aware of, based on the age of your vehicles now, every so many years, you have to take your car in for an emissions test, and you can't even get your vehicle's license renewed without passing those. But again, this is for the protection of the public. Well, I've spent a lot of time talking about products itself, but dealing with what happened when I was just out of high school. OSHA, the Occupational Safe and Health Act, came about to protect employees and make employers responsible for hazards on the job where people worked and they were seriously injured in the workplace because the employer did provide products to benefit the individual employee. They spent the least amount of money on that and really wasn't paying the persons as much. And so workplace injuries began to go up. And as I said earlier, the conditions of the companies that the people were working under were not so good. And so what happened is when OSHA came out, OSHA set the standard by saying to companies, we'll give you a fine and other possible sanctions. You can also find that you reach the point that a violation of OSHA can result in jail time for the people who are over the organization that consistently violate OSHA. And so the key thing that OSHA did was to bring better working conditions for the protection of employees and profits at the company level. Their argument was that they were being adversely affected. Well, every person who works for the companies has a family, and they should be able to go to work and come home safe and sound and not be injured from making a living. So anyway, companies that have had some very serious issues was like Toyota. We kind of talk about that a little bit. And then Mattel. Now, you know about Mattel, right? Mattel, a toy maker. And you'll be surprised when you read about these product liability cases and find out that the products were damaging to the consumers, as I talked about cars already, and Toyota included. And so they were about making money, but not protecting the consumer. And now, as you know, almost every toy, for example, that's manufactured goes through the period where they have to be tested, and that if there is a number of injuries that take place as a result of that particular item, then the company can be sued. If you click on this and it open up, take you to where you can find more details about Mattel. And one of the big issues was that the paint that was on the toys was lead, and magnets were easy to swallow for kids. And if you go through and you read a little bit about this, and you start to see some of the issues dealing with the lead paint and magnets and things of that nature. So look at what happened as recently as 2006. Now that sounds like um, a recent time, but that's far away. Over 180,000 items of American Girl jewelry was recalled because of lead involved in it. So lead was a big, big, big issue. And if you go through, I'm not going to spend the time on it, but and you can look at that. You also, as I said, can learn about Toyota in the cars themselves. And so I want to say to you that it's important for you to understand that in terms of operating business, that you protect the employees as well as the public, the consumer, and the government on the federal, state, and even local level has agencies. For example, did you not know that there was the old adage that if you go to get a pound of meat, you had to make sure that it was a pound of meat, not because of the meat itself, but one of the unethical practices that used to happen with butchers until they changed the kind of scales. But when I was a kid, there was tipping it, and the way they would do it is that they would put it up there, and you would see it go to a pound, but you couldn't see that their finger was pushing it down. That practice kind of ceased with the digital scales. However, though, the problem that still persists with those is the quality of the meat itself, and making sure that, for example, even the animals that they came from are properly, um, how should I say, raised. And because, as you know, what they eat turns into what their meat is, and then you eat it, and there we go. And there's been arguments about cancer and other ailments taking place because of those kinds of things. There's a companies that have trouble, and I'm not talking about the corona, like Tyson, Purdue. Those are the main two I can think of. But the key thing is that they try to advertise even that when they feed their chickens, they feed them corn and other things to make sure that they're eating properly, so that when you eat the meat that's made from them. So there's a person I know that says, well, that's why they stopped eating meat. I says, well, you got the same problem with plants as well, because of the additives that are not the additives, but because of the um, spraying of these plants. And so now people are going organic, and now they're discovering that it's kind of hard to determine whether a product is organic 100%. But once again, with the fact that we have pesticides and all of that stuff to keep the meat looking a certain way, or rather the vegetable looking a certain way, how they spray it and those kind of things. Yeah. So digressing back to the meat a little bit, I was listening to uh, someone on TV recently, and they were saying that, isn't it interesting how you can see, a burger on TV and it looks so good, and then when you go and get yours, it don't look anything like that. It's smashed. Okay. And it doesn't, the sauce on it, even the particularly the tomatoes or lettuce that's put on there, or pickles or whatever it is, it doesn't look the same way. But you should be aware of the fact that when they put those things out for commercials and market them, that they spread, if you see it in a magazine, they do the same thing as Photoshop does on some of those items. So, but anyway, that's another whole issue. And so we come to the point of these activity cards, which you can go over, and you, from your reading, you'll know the answer to these questions. The rule of civil conduct, commanding you do what is right and prohibiting you from doing what is wrong, is the law. And so you put that under that. Old judge made law that our founders brought from England, based on the custom and usage that the courts recognize as being the binding on the community. We call that in law school uh, common law, which means case decisions make up, and the application of it is a Latin phrase called stare decisis, which means the previous decisions affect the future decisions, and you can use those to modify or change law. Put that in no. Any law that is a formal enactment of a legislature, we call it a statute, and that's what that is. And usually statutes are written by, to give you an example of legislature, is Congress and the Senate, and that's on the federal as well as on the state levels as well. And you can go through the rest of these. and it'll help you, and it'll refresh your memory on what you read in your paper. Okay, so that's it for me. Um, any questions? So if you're going to be in business, you want to be in compliance with the law, of course, but you also want to operate on an ethical level. Remember, one of our transferable skills is ethics. And I always remind my students that ethics is so important. It can help you be successful, but people like to violate them and use shortcuts. I always tell people that if you use a shortcut to get something done, then you remember you're closer to failure than you are to success. And that if you're going to do things the old-fashioned way, and take time and allow it to be done, taken in consideration is, would you yourself feel comfortable with that process? Then you apply it based on that. It's like the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, or treat people the way that you want to be treated, that kind of thing. Well, the same thing in business. Operate in business the same way that you want to be treated as a customer when you're in that position, and that's the key thing. So with that, I'm going to um, give you a key phrase, then I'm going to say a few parting words, um, and that is based on what we talked about tonight, and that is ethics and law. That's it. Give me that. You got to give me both parts though to get your points. Okay, ethics and law. All right. Now, I hope that you have learned over these last quick 5.56 modules some things that will benefit you as you move forward in obtaining your degree in business, and that when you do begin to be a business person, excuse me, as many of you are already, as you progress and move forward, that you keep an idea and understand these practices. One of the things, though, that's so important that I say in imparting to you is this, is make sure that you have a good lawyer. Now, when I say a lawyer, make sure you have a lawyer who understands business. Just because a person says they're a lawyer does not mean that they understand business. I started out in the corporate sphere, so I understand dealing with, and I've dealt with contracts in the entertainment field, sports field, from real estate, transactions on the commercial as well as residential level. I did those things. Um, and it wasn't just what I studied in law school. But then my passion, though, was criminal law. So basically, when it comes to those kinds of things, I could probably advise people on a certain level, but then I would work alongside someone whose area of specialty is working in dealing with companies. For example, I was told when I was working in the big law firm not to go into litigation, corporate litigation, because all it involves is lawsuits and settlements, but to go into mergers and acquisitions. Now that's a big ticket because that's happening constantly in business. As you know, um, if you have a Sprint phone now, if you have Sprint, it's no longer Sprint. Do you know what it's called now? Nope, nope, not AT&T. Yep, that's it. It's T-Mobile. T-Mobile and Sprint merged. And as you probably already know, if you had anything to do with Sprint, that Sprint used to be Nextel. Um, and Nextel became Sprint, and they became bigger. So now, and I'm not a fan of T-Mobile or Sprint. So when they came together, I said that's the world's largest um, uh, terrible network. I got friends who they live and die by T-Mobile. Well, I live with Verizon, which it's more costly, but it's very, 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 very reliable. In fact, I use it all the time, and so I like them. But what I'm saying to you is that these companies are being bought up by other companies, and then they get absorbed into the product of the company. And you notice that when T-Mobile purchased Sprint, they must have recognized that they wanted their network, but they didn't want their name. And so that tells you something. Again, I've never had T-Mobile, but I did have Sprint, and never again. Even if you gave it to me, you remember the guy who left? It's funny. He left Verizon, uh, or was it T-Mobile? He left. I think it was Verizon that said, "Can you hear me now?" And then he started wearing the yellow shirt. Well, I haven't seen him anymore, but if we do see him, yeah, it was Verizon. Yeah, because it's based on the number of antennas. But yeah, I love my Verizon. I do. I really do. I have at home Xfinity, which I'm starting to like them as far as internet is concerned. They're a little costly, but I found them more reliable. I never want AT&T. I had them for internet. I had and TV. Mm-mm. Nope. And I don't want a dish because I learned a long time ago that if I'm watching a game and my team is on the West Coast playing, that if there's a storm in between there, I'm gonna have an interference with signal. But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. Well, it's been a pleasure. I hope you have a nice break. Again, many of you won't see me unless you switch your major into criminal justice. Um, People who didn't do so well in this class, and that wasn't most of you, that's only a few. And this was my largest class. I mean, I had more than the limit that they're supposed to, so they had to pay me extra. This was my largest class that I had. And I had two other classes that were not, they were like 25, but this one was more like 35 and 36. And so it was quite uh, a handful, but I enjoyed teaching this class, particularly sharing details of reminding students about the importance of contracts and why they're a necessity in business. So I'm going to say good night to you. Um, there are students that sometimes find themselves needing a reference, and you can find me, and I'll be happy to write a letter. Right now, it's kind of difficult because of the fact that we don't have access to the campuses, and so I don't have access to the stationery. But if there are phone calls that need to be made, or if there's a form that the employer, prospective employer needs, um, I'm I'm game for that, and you can always reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help. So I wish you guys the best. Enjoy your break. We start back October the 5th with the next term. And there's a lot of new things that are happening here. First of all, number one, starting in October, actually officially on the 15th, I believe it is, we will no longer be Rasmussen College. We'll be Rasmussen University. And then also, they're putting out a better version of Blackboard. You probably received an email. Did you receive an email from the school about the new version that's coming? Do you recall? Have you seen that? Yeah, yeah, it's going to take place more in the winter uh, rather than the fall quarter coming up. They'll bring you in and they're going to give you information. It's supposed to be more user friendly. I've kind of looked at it a little bit, but you know, uh, sometimes what they call improvements, I look at it and I say, man, it wasn't broke. Why do you need to fix it? But anyway, this is supposed to be more user friendly, and we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. Well, good night, you guys. And again, reminding you with this pandemic that we're dealing with, stay safe, and I'll see you down the road. Good night. You're welcome.